Hi, everybody. My name is Kiri Dorsky. I am the operations coordinator at the NWTC Artisan and Business Center. This is our speaker series called An Artist's Journey. Um, this series was started in person prior to the pandemic, but since the pandemic, we've been doing them virtually because we reach so many more people and because the content is so much more accessible. So sometimes I am live in my office, sometimes I'm at home or on the road. I've also done a couple of studio visits. So this series is all about business for us. We like to feature artists and their kind of career stories. We like to cover business topics like tonight. And then I also try to feature local organizations that serve artists. So tonight we're talking social media with Craig, but coming up in January and February, we've got a couple of organizations like On Broadway for Green Bay, and we have Ampersand Art Supplies down in Sheboygan. So a couple of fun, interesting topics coming up. I am going to turn it over. Craig, would you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. My name is Craig Bauer. I am the owner, operator, chief rocker of Design That Rocks, agency-ish here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I also serve as the marketing director for a company locally called Hansen Foods. We are a private label pizza manufacturer. We make about 30 different brands of frozen pizza across the country.
Awesome. For those of you joining us live tonight, please feel free to unmute and ask questions or drop questions in the chat. I'll be sure to read them. But if you've joined us before, you know I like to keep these things super casual. I don't like anything to feel too formal or too rehearsed. I'd rather just feel like I'm hanging out with a friend, which I do consider Craig a very good friend.
We are, absolutely.
So we've been kind of working on and off together for a number of years, and then Craig has started helping out with our residency program here. He serves as a mentor for our residents, and I go to Craig for all things social media, web, marketing. I like to pick Craig's brain, so if you guys don't interact with us, I will sit here and pick Craig's brain all night. So
Nothing wrong with that.
Social media, we've got a couple of bullet points that Craig sent me probably almost a year ago at this point. But for those of you live, please ask your questions. Let's get out of this what you want. Craig, where do you want to start?
Well, I guess, when we start talking about social media, a lot of people will start off just saying, well, where do I begin? Where do I start? Maybe they're trying it. They're doing some things personally. A lot of people have personal experiences because we're in a culture where most people are on Facebook or some form of social media, Instagram, whatever. And a lot of people struggle with, how do I make that transition to using it for business? How do I use it to market myself? How do I, quote unquote, monetize social media? How can I benefit from that? So when those discussions come up, I usually try to ask people to just kind of take a step back and really, before jumping into, hey, what can I do on social media? I like to take them back and have a discussion about, so let's talk about your brand first. Let's talk about your personal brand and your business brand, or your artist brand. And are those the same or are they different? As you know, and we've talked about before, a lot of times they are polar opposites. Somebody can be very much one way in person and very different online. And what you really try to do is before you start, you want to kind of establish and define what is your personal brand, and then what steps can I take to replicate that or bring that with me online, versus just, hey, I'm just going to start posting a bunch of random photos and never talking about anything I do, but yet in person I talk about everything I do with everybody. That's the disconnect for the consumer. So that's really where I begin, looking at back at that, what your personal brand is. How do you present yourself? What do you talk about? What don't you talk about? Are you an introvert, an extrovert? Things like that. That really has to be defined. That really has to be something that you answer, which that's challenging for a lot of people as well, because they may not know what that is, or nobody's asked them to define what that is.
I think one of the things you've mentioned in the past when we've talked about this is about how even the way you dress and present yourself in a room is part of your brand. And so,
Absolutely.
sitting down and thinking about that, I think about, well, my 9 to 5 here, right? Which I am super passionate about, is a huge part of my brand. But I am also a painter, right? So there's a
Right.
whole lot of kind of facets. And we've talked about this in our residency program too. Sometimes I think it's really helpful to ask people,
Oh,
somebody
absolutely.
you trust, somebody that like you're not going to get your feelings hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be like, well,
Yeah.
what do you think of? We have this is a good one because Annie, who runs our ceramic studio, asked me to kind of summarize how I see her, and it was kind of eye-opening for both of us because she makes kind of creepy artwork, right? She makes these kind
Yeah.
of creepy skulls, but she's just like a sunshiny bright spot every day when I see her. And so to
Right.
really talk about who she is as a person and her brand, it was a good conversation. It was a good exercise for us.
Yeah. I mean, people that know you are going to know, and they're going to be open, and they're going to tell you what they perceive your brand to be. And some of the challenge comes is a lot of times people, once they're told, that may not be what they want it to be, right? They may be thinking, "Oh, I'm this way," but when you ask people, they're like, "No, I don't see you that way at all." Which then what do you do, right? What am I changing something before I'm jumping on social? Or how do I combine all that and get your hands around it? And you know, as crazy as it sounds, a lot of times I tell people to start making lists. Just get that old-fashioned pencil and paper out and start writing down what do you want to be known for? What do you want your brand to be? How do you want people to perceive you? And then what's that feedback you're getting? And are you connecting the dots there, or are you not? And then you gotta kind of make some changes. If you want it to be something else, and that can take time. That's not an immediate thing for a lot of people.
I think one of the best exercises you actually had me do was to look at websites that I really liked and that I didn't like. And on that journey for myself, I looked at social media accounts that I like and I don't like. And
Yeah,
I literally had like a sheet of paper and I was like, I like these people. I don't like how these are being done. I
yeah,
feel like, I like this, but I don't like this part of it. And kind of having that paper in front of me was like, oh yeah, that feels right. Like that part feels like it connects with me and how I want to be seen online. And
yeah.
that was an impactful exercise.
It's one of the best things, if you think back to, I mean, I'm older, right? So I come from a generation where we didn't have social media, we didn't have websites. So if I was going up against somebody for, let's say, for a job, for a pitch or some project, I never got to see anything, any work that they did beforehand. I had no sense of what my competition was. And now I can literally pinpoint, I want to be just like these three people. What are these three people doing? And you can find, if they're doing it out there, you can find nearly everything they're doing, and you can find components that you can emulate in some way. It's like being able to look over the shoulder of your competition, which we've never been able to do in history before. Like you've just never been able to do it as in as much detail as you can now, you know. I can download high res images of my competition, and if I'm doing design work, I can look and see what fonts they're using, what software they're using. Like I can often find out their client list. I can find out where they live. I mean, it's an abundance of knowledge. Um, and it's same with artists. I can find out what's selling, what's not selling in a certain geographic area of the country. What are they doing to promote their artwork versus somebody else's? What events are they going to? Because everybody's telling everybody what they're doing, you
Yep.
know?
I mean, that was one of the best things is I will sidetrack a little bit. I was putting together my artist resume and I knew there were a couple of exhibits that I had forgotten to write down on my list. And so I was
Sure.
like, oh, I was in that show with that other person. And I went to his website and he had his list of shows and there it was, the title of it that I couldn't
Oh,
remember.
yeah.
And so then I'm like, oh, he applied to that show. I've never applied to that show. Maybe I should, you know?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
we don't realize that those resources are right at our fingertips.
Right. And there's still there's this misconception of, I think, just copying people. People don't want to, oh, I really love what they did with that video, but I don't want to copy them. And I mean, the internet is full of people of copying things, and everything is different. If I copy somebody's video, I'm never going to be able to do it exactly like they're doing it. It will be mine. It's not going to be, if they're really good, mine likely won't be as good as theirs. If theirs is really terrible, mine might be a little better, but it's never exactly the same. So that it's free inspiration everywhere. It's free resources to look and see what are those people that you want to be like, or that you respect their brand, or whatever the reason is. You can see what they're doing every day.
I mean, there's theory in the art world that no art is completely original anymore, that we're all sampling from each other, right?
Sure. Right.
And in history, it makes sense because it's true. You find inspiration everywhere you go. And if I tried to go copy a Van Gogh in front of me, I'm not going to ever be able to do it exactly like he did.
Correct. And social's the same way. You don't all have the same. Everyone doesn't have the same equipment. You don't have the same skill set. You don't have the same language, the same looks, the same support structure. Like, everything is different. So I could set out to copy somebody and probably find that to be much more difficult than just doing whatever I was going to do anyway.
I also find that most artists, are really happy to share. Oh, I used this platform to build this, or I'm using this e-commerce site and it's working well, or this one's really terrible, or, I found a lot of traction when I post reels, or, that kind of thing. And I find that people like to have those conversations. And a lot of times artists leave a conversation with me and they're like, oh, I wish more people we could talk about these things. And I was like, you could just try.
Well, right. And the people who are willing, the artists who are willing to share that information, are ones that are doing it and doing it well, and they feel good about their brand and what they're doing. And by talking about it, they're driving people to their platforms.
Point.
Yeah. So you build this confidence of, I really didn't want to spend 3 months making this website. I didn't want to write all the copy. I didn't want to gather all my pictures. I didn't want to do all that work. But once you have that work done, it makes it 20 times easier to tell every single person you meet, hey, you should check out my website. Yep. Because you're proud of what the results are, because you put that time into it. If you do it in 2 days, you're not going to be as proud to send people there, because you're going to know in your mind, oh, I should have did some other things. I'll get to them later, some of that stuff. But just, putting all that content out there on social, on your website, and doing it every day automatically makes you proud of it, automatically makes you want to share it. And that comes out in naturally sharing it, telling people to go there and telling people what to do.
Okay, so to get back to social media, say you've established your brand and you're feeling really good about it. How do you choose which social media platforms to use?
Oh, well, you have to do all of them, right? Isn't that the answer?
That's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. It comes back down to some of the things we were just talking about, some of that initial research. You need to go out and find what your goal is. Okay. Is your goal to just have brand awareness? Is your goal to be in a particular show? Is your goal to sell more work? Or is your goal really just to build that brand and be brand awareness so that your peers see you in that space? I'd research what people are using in those spaces that you want to be in. If people who are trying to sell, if all your competition is on Instagram and they're selling through an Instagram store, that's probably where you need to be. If you find that they're not and they're doing something else, then that's probably where you need to be. Or make a compelling argument why you're going to try it on Instagram store anyway, but you better have a plan for that, But low-hanging fruit, I would check to see what they're doing, and that's where I would start. A lot of the social platforms are divided by age categories, and you can go online. Anybody can go online and search, and you'll see the demographics for the age groups that are using each of the main 5 or 6 social platforms. And if you know what your audience is, where your audience is, where that age group is you're trying to attract, that could be another reason to steer you in one way or the other. If you go through all of that type of research and you still don't know and you're still hesitant, then my recommendation is always to pick one. and pick one to start with and go with that. And if you don't know which one it is, if you're brand new, you just got your smartphone and you're trying to figure out what to do, download the main, the Facebook and the Instagram and the Threads and the TikTok and Snapchat or Pinterest, some of those. See which ones you like. They're all a little bit different. They all work similar, but they're all not the same. You'll know pretty quickly, devote some time, some hours to exploring those. You'll know pretty quickly what you're seeing, what you're looking for, and how easy it is or difficult it is to use. And then just go from there.
I think that's a really good point. Because if it feels comfortable and natural and you enjoy using it, you're going to be more apt to actually put in the effort to do it.
You are. And they're just, I find, like, I love going on TikTok. I find a lot of valuable content on TikTok for me to take in. Using TikTok, making content for TikTok is much more of a hard sell for me. Like, I do some things, but it's just for fun. It's just to learn how to use it. I'm not like, oh my God, I really got to reach this certain number of people and try to connect with these people on TikTok and do all these really cool transition videos and all the latest trends and everything. That's not me. That's not my demographic. I'm too old for that process anyway. I don't have enough time in the day to do that.
And I also feel too old for it. I have dabbled a little bit. I love to consume TikToks. I feel like I have learned a lot, and I love it from a learning standpoint.
Yeah.
But I have found that, I don't know, Instagram makes Reels so much easier to post, in my opinion.
They do. They absolutely do. I agree. Yeah.
Pick a song and it like syncs the video up to the song for you.
Yeah.
Like, boom, done.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's pros and cons to all those apps, and that is certainly one. And it's strange because we can say, well, we're too old for TikTok or whatever, but I could go on TikTok right now and I could find thousands or millions of people my age making content. So it's all out there.
I mean, I follow a 75-year-old granny on TikTok who I just love. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to find what it is you're looking for, and it's all out there. There's the element of doing social media research for what I want to do with my social media, but then there's the element of social media research for just consuming that content, because consuming content, even though it's not related to what you're trying to do, maybe it is very creative. It is very inspiring. You do learn and are exposed to a lot of things that you would not otherwise be exposed to. So, a lot of times I'll turn the TV off and for an hour, I'll just randomly go on TikTok lives, and it's a wide range of things that you see. Some you stay on for a while and some you just scroll by,
I talked to a woman who took a jewelry class here, a couple of them, I think. And she found some social media fame, not in the art world, because she has these beautiful Great Pyrenees dogs.
Oh, sure.
And, I had found her on TikTok years ago. And when we caught up in person, I ran into her a couple months ago in Door County. We were chatting, and she said she actually stopped TikTok because the trolls and the audience were so much more harsh and critical, and she couldn't handle the messages, and that she found Instagram to be much more positive, inspiring. She felt like she had a much more like cohesive audience.
Yeah.
And so we kind of, I didn't mean to get into super deep conversation with her, but I found that kind of interesting because I think social media in general is pretty interesting, and how she is still really quite famous on Instagram and just totally let TikTok go. She just, for her mental health, was like, I'm done with it. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, as with anything these days, right? I mean, social media is a stomping ground for people just putting their opinion out there, and there's no filter really. So they don't care if they hurt your feelings. Someone doesn't care if they use a slur, or they call you skinny, or they call you ugly, or all that stuff unfortunately is there. And unfortunately is much more slanted towards women than it is men, which is terrible to have to deal with for anybody, but to have, half the population subjected to that, it's not right. And unfortunately, I think all these social media companies try to put restrictions in place. They try to do things, but you just can't. You can't have open communities and expect that the restrictions are going to work. So you do have to have a thick skin. I mean, you're going to post a picture of a painting and you might get one person, I love it, and 30 people like, what the hell is that?
Seriously. Yep.
And you have to be able just to say, well, that's not my customer. That's not the person I'm looking for.
I also think it's really interesting that I could post something and it can have 400 to 500 views, and I could post something that I think is fairly similar and it has like 40 to 50 views.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's so many factors that go into that.
Yeah, so much of social media is when you post it on every platform has a different preferred time, recommended time based on your time zone and based on the number of followers you have and the region you're in. I mean, there's all these things that go into the algorithm of what could possibly make a video go viral or something like that. And I mean, it's a needle in a haystack. I mean, you're if you get on a train like that, you're lucky. Most people post stuff and you get a small percentage of your followers that see it, which is why people repurpose content for multiple platforms, because you're covering 5% on this one, 6% on this one, etc. Or you do it on different days, you alternate platforms on different days, or you repost something 3 or 4 times a month on your same platform because you're trying to cover more people. You're trying to get more exposure for stuff. And I run into it all the time. I mean, I have pretty small followers on my accounts, but I tend to have more engaged followers. I have more conversations with my followers than I'd rather not have 50,000 followers, but I don't talk to any. I'd rather have 1,000 and 900 of them I'm comfortable sending them a message or replying to a comment or getting to know them a little bit, those type of things. But that's that gets into using your social media and how again, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert plays into that a lot too. But the numbers, yeah, there's billions of users, right? So man, it's hard to, oh, I'm gonna make this video and I stayed up all night and I edited it on TikTok and I spent all this time and research, like one of the best ones I ever did, and I post it, and you check in 4 hours and it's got like 3 views, because you posted it at the wrong time, with the wrong hashtag, with the wrong title, or you're just in a region where TikTok is pushing down your content because across the street, the neighbors are paying $1 million to advertise on TikTok. So their ads are coming through and you're not getting anything. That happens all the time.
I think a lot about, when I post things and what the kind of feedback is that I get and where it goes or who's seeing it. But the hard part for me, and this is the other part I tell artists a lot, is that if this is going to be a drain on your productivity and on your creativity, it's not going to help you be an artist. It's not going to help you be a successful artist.
Correct.
But if you can make this social media, online engagement be a part of your normal workflow and be a part of what you do, and you make it easy on yourself to do this, and you kind of integrate it into your routine and kind of your natural way of working, that's a much better approach. Because if you see social media content and website editing as this like, oh God, it's this horrible thing I have to do and I hate it and I push it off and I never want to do it.
It is horrible. It is.
It's work, right?
It's yeah.
But for me, and actually this advice came from Jenna Cast, so I will keep saying her name when she tells me this, but her background was social media marketing before she quit her job to become a full-time artist. And so she said she uses her phone like a tool. And so taking pictures of her artwork, stepping back so you can really see the composition and give some perspective. And so she said, I just make videos and photos part of my natural, like how I create a painting. And so that's the approach I've tried to take, is like, okay, I put my phone up on the gooseneck and I'll tune out the world and just work. And then I have content already made for me that I can go edit and play with when I have the time. But at least I have a wealth of stuff to play with.
Right. And that's all true. And the important thing, there's 2 things to remember. Number one, there's no wrong content, right? Like a lot of people, like we've had conversations before where artists are like, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to show. Like I don't have anything to take pictures of. I don't have anything to take a video of. And I'll be like, well, what do you do? Well, I do printmaking. And I'll be like, oh my God, that's fascinating. Do you know people that don't know how to do something like printmaking or don't know how to do something like stained glass, any of those type of things, the average person doesn't know how to do those. So the process of doing that is fascinating to someone who doesn't know. Those are the TikToks I watch the most, are of people doing things that I didn't know how that was done. I'd never seen that before. Um, so just something that you feel is a mundane task. Oh, I had to get the gesso out and spread my canvas, to someone who hasn't painted,
Yeah.
they
Well,
don't know what that is.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
They're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, you could cover up an existing painting. You could redo. I didn't know that either. You mean people reuse canvases? It just leads into, and if someone does watch it and they already know that, they just keep scrolling, but it doesn't diminish your value by posting it, you
Right.
know.
And
But a
it's
lot of people,
fascinating, I also show you how much of a nerd I am about like tools. I watch so many videos on people's favorite things. Like this is a pen that is a whiteout pen with a
um,
tiny little pen tip. My favorite highlighter. Like people telling me like, "Oh, I use this tool for this thing because it gives me these results." Oh, I'm sucked right in. Like I want to
yeah,
watch you use that tool. I don't care what you're making because I'm like, "Ooh, do I need to buy that? Would that help my process?"
exactly. Yeah. Um, I do that too. I mean, if I'm looking to buy something or I'm looking to try something, I'll go and I'll do a search and find people have made videos about it. Um, and some of the advice isn't always the best, but some of it is. You take it for what it's worth. The second thing I was going to say about the social media part of it is what I always try to encourage people now. Like I come from a background of print, and I come from a background of business cards. And I know that there's this whole movement out there. Oh my God, business cards suck, and I don't want to have them. I don't want to carry them around. Blah blah blah. And
I
yeah,
all right here.
yeah, and the fact is, and you can find this information online. The statistics are out there. People with business cards, there's a higher percentage that those people, when you give them a card, that they will go to your website versus emailing them a link. So when I'm at an event or I'm meeting people and I'm trying to encourage people to visit my little 100 follower Instagram account to try and grow my business or grow the art that I'm doing, handing them a professionally designed business card, not a crappy one, but a nice one that reflects your brand and your style. You give them that card, you've got a very high percentage chance that every person you give that card to is going to go look at your whatever you're sending them to, your website, your Instagram, whatever it is. Versus I could send out 2 million emails. I'm not going to get that kind of engagement. So I always tell people you're the number one seller for whatever it is that you're doing. So that's why you got to be proud of what that is. You have to be willing to not be afraid to tell everybody at this dinner party you went to, yeah, I got a new website. If you guys should go check it out, here's my card, and you pass those cards around. You've seen me do that before. So that's what it is. You're driving the people there. The days of, oh, I'm just going to post this video and it's going to go viral or all these people are going to see it. All the social media platforms are there to make money now. So advertising is priority one. If you are not advertising on them, you are already 50% the reach you were going to get in the first place. So you need to find ways of getting people there. Um, and artists in general do a lot of in-person events because that's how you network and showcase your work and all that kind of stuff. You need to be telling people where to go. You got to give them a reason to go there, and that kind of justifies a lot of the content that you're doing, the time it takes to do it. It's part of that process.
I had two thoughts while you were talking. Um, I think that we talk a lot about business cards, but there is an artist who I work with who does a little bit of a presentation for the residents. Sorry if any residents are watching this, I'm going to do a little spoiler. When they get ready for their final exhibit at the end of the year, she also talks to them about other kind of collateral materials.
Sure.
And how, especially as a visual artist, it's so important to either have like, something this big or like a rack card that, might go with your exhibit. And maybe it has a little bio or a little artist statement. Maybe it has a picture of something you're really proud of. And then
Yeah.
this thing like business card on the back or whatever. And, when somebody comes to one of your events, let them leave with something.
Yeah.
They may not be able to afford something that moment, a big $1,000 painting, right?
Right.
But if they can take that card home, if it's a business card or a rack card, and I have stuff everywhere in here, right? I'm a collector. I keep
Mm-hmm.
things. I like ephemera. And if I put it up there and I'm like, oh, you know what? I really need to find a gift for somebody, or I really am looking to decorate that new bedroom, or that's where I look. That's where I'm like, oh, I was so inspired by that person. How do I find them? Do I have a piece of material from them? So
Yeah.
that was one thought. And then the other thought I had was like, okay, so I meet somebody in person, and then I go pull up their Facebook page, and they haven't made a post on their Facebook page in 6 months. Immediately, to be totally honest with you, immediately I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, like how frequent. Like if I'm going to go look at somebody's social media page, how recent do you think the most recent post should be?
Yeah. It really depends on, again, what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish. But social media in general is it's a daily activity, right? People who, every time you go on and you refresh your app, it pulls up new content. So if you're not making new content, your content's not going to come up. Um, you know, it goes back to your goals, and like you were saying, how much time do I want to invest in, recording this, and is it a drain on my creativity? Is it a drain on what I'm trying to accomplish? If you're exhibiting your art at shows and you're making sales, you're making connections, maybe you don't need it at all. If you're not, then you find that you're going to, everybody kind of has to set their own cadence. Certainly, I think once a month is way too little. Um, People will think that you died or that you're gone, and why am I here? Kind of a thing, because it's an instantaneous society now. We want the latest. What's going on? What are you doing today? What's going on right now? Um, I personally, for my business, which is a little more, I mean, it's commercial art, so it's a little different, but I try to post every day, at least one thing a day. And it can be a picture, sometimes it could be a joke. You've seen stuff I posted, so it doesn't, it's not always a hard sell every day. Hey, I can design a logo for you. I may say that every 2 weeks, or something like that, but I'm not hitting you every day. I'm just kind of giving stuff to be relevant, to be funny, to be sharing something I think is interesting, those type of things. Which is that whole authenticity part. Like, I tend to share things that I would tell you in person. Like, hey, did you see this? But instead I share it and I tell everybody, if they don't like it, they can scroll by, and if they like it, they can click and read it, that kind of thing. And everything's not for everybody,
I want to get back to authenticity, but I see we have a question in the chat, so we're going to hold that thought. I'm writing it down so I circle back to it.
Okay.
The question in the chat says, any thoughts on Threads similarity to Twitter, better than Instagram? Question mark.
I don't think Threads is better than Instagram. I really have started diving into Threads more in the last month and a half. And I found that it actually is a really good companion to Instagram. And I know that's how they sold it at the beginning, and everybody was like, oh, it's just like Twitter and it's going to take over, whatever. It's not like Twitter. It is quite a bit different. But if you engage with your audience on Instagram, such as, you post something, and like I was saying, you have regular people that comment and you get to know these people over time. If you have an audience like that you're getting to know, Threads just takes that to the next level. Like, you can click on it, it takes you right from Instagram to Threads, and the conversation can then go longer and then shared with other people, which makes it a lot very interesting compared to how Twitter is. It just works differently. But I do like it. I do think Threads has some legs. I think it's got a ways to go, but they keep adding little things, and I'm finding success in, just having better conversations with people, which a lot of people joke, but it's kind of like the old days of social media where people were really having more conversations. Threads seems like that, um, which is nice.
I hadn't really looked into it much. I keep getting the notifications about it, and I just am like, oh, I've got too much on my plate. But I don't know. Now you've kind of intrigued me.
Yeah, it is. I do enjoy it. I do think that Twitter is it's going to go away for a big part of the population. There's a certain percentage of people that will continue to use it. I use it now mainly because I have several clients that use it, so I'm kind of locked into posting and keeping things updated. And I do post on my account on there just so people know I'm alive. But I'm very close to just not using that account anymore. But one of the caveats to that, one of the reasons I haven't is because there's this whole issue on if you just cancel your Twitter account, there's no rules in place now for someone else to register that name and then pretend that they're you.
Yeah.
Which is, not as important for Design That Rocks because I've only got a few thousand people that are engaging with me. But if I'm a bigger name and suddenly I just, I'm not going to use it anymore, and you let that account go, they're just letting anybody take those names, and you can pay for the verification, and you can completely fake people into thinking you're somebody that you're not. So that's why a lot of people now are holding on to their Twitter account, and they may tweet, their last tweet may say something like, I'm not tweeting anymore, find me, and they put their links on there. But it's only a matter of time before Twitter gets rid of those accounts, and they're going to close it if you don't use it. So it's kind of a dangerous time for what was Twitter. It really was a great platform for a long time. I have met a lot of great people, but a lot of those people now have switched over to Threads, and we've continued those conversations on Threads. So I do think Threads is worth taking a look at.
Um, I want to come back to authenticity, I promise, but I have one question. You were talking. Do you use any kind of management software to manage all of your posting, or do you do it all manually?
I would say probably 85 to 90% I do it manually. I have used automated software in the past. I will schedule Facebook posts using their platform. And it's a great tie into the authenticity conversation because I find if I schedule things, I am not authentic. It's fake. Yeah, you can just you can just tell.
You can tell I put too much thought into it because it doesn't sound like me.
Yeah, it's if I'm gonna post some, hey, here's this new thing and this new logo comparison. Look at these designs and what do you think of this? And I could do a great design for you. And I post that and type it out on a Thursday night, right? Where I've got 15 minutes to process it all and type it out so it's perfect. And I post it at 1:30 on a Monday, where I'm in the middle of 15 things. And if somebody asked me a question about a logo design, it'd be a much different answer. And that comes through on social media. You can absolutely tell when someone's post is just, oh, well, they must have wrote that 3 days ago because it just doesn't fit the time of day or the conversation or what's going on. Or you'll see stuff that is posted that doesn't fit with like the day, like maybe it's a holiday or maybe some major event happened in the news and you're like, why are they posting that today? Like that doesn't fit. Like you see these different things where you're like, oh, that's it's not authentic,
I think weather and clothing play into that too. Like
yes.
If it's a snowy day and it's the middle of July and I'm like, why are you posting that picture? It's
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's beautiful day in Wisconsin, and it's minus 20 outside. Everybody's like, what?
Yep.
Yeah.
I do think that, like, especially for us here at the Artisan Center, our social media, we do a lot of scheduling because we have a lot of, like, you need to know about this happening on this day. You need to know about winter break coming up. You need to know about, those things schedule. That's easy. You know,
Yeah.
that's not going to change. It needs to go out at the specific time.
Yep.
If you want things to sound like you, and you okay, so Jan just got off here, so I can talk about this. But I just finished a painting for Jan for Christmas,
Oh,
and
nice.
so immediately I'm in the middle of working on it, and I'm like, this is so cute. I need to post this to social media because I'm in the middle of it. I'm excited about it, right?
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh, now I have to figure out how to block a few people that could tell her about this Christmas surprise. So, but I like the immediacy of it. I like I'm excited about this. That to me comes through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it comes through to your audience. You know, they're going to be able to tell you're excited about it. And there, yeah, there's places for scheduling. And I know bigger companies, you know, social media managers can't possibly do it live all the time. I keep my client list purposely low so
Yep.
that I can do it that way and I can be authentic for them. If they're just looking to pay somebody to schedule it out for a month and randomly post or whatever, I can do that for them, but that's not where my strength lies. Mine is going to be more, you know, it's a beautiful day today in whatever hometown they're in, and it's, you know, whatever it might be, just being that authentic, you know, not fake. You know.
And I think for me, we talk about authenticity a lot around here and in the residency and everything we kind of do. And
Mhm.
maybe it's because I'm picky about it, but I feel like artists are their brand. It's very integral to who they are, what they do. And it's really hard to separate the two. So
Mhm.
if I feel like on social media you're a different person than you are when I see you here, that's gonna not gel for me. And
Correct.
if I go
Correct.
look at somebody's social media, or going off on a million tangents, if somebody follows me on social media and I go look at their profile and they have a cool name, I'm like, who is this? Kind of looks familiar. I kind of recognize that work. But where's the human component?
Right. Right.
Who is this person? Why are they doing this? You know, what are they making? What drives them?
Hmm.
And maybe that's my own specific wants out of social media. But I think there's that we look for that human connection as people. And I
Yeah.
think that makes a big difference in your brand.
I always go back to, and I was going to talk about this in my presentation at the summit that we had, and I didn't end up discussing it. But when you go back, like, and you look at the history um, in the art world, and one of my favorites is Andy Warhol. And you know, before Instagram, you know, Andy took Polaroids of everything. There's
Everything.
a history of documentation of not only his work, but you know, people, the fun side, the party side,
His
like
whole
his
life.
life. Yeah. So people,
Remind
you
me
know,
we're not on camera to tell you about my pilgrimage to the Andy Warhol Museum sometime.
oh, very nice, very nice. But it's that whole thing. Like everybody will say, well, you know, when I talk to people about what they could post, they'll say, well, nobody wants to see me mix gesso on my canvas. And I'm like, could you imagine if we had footage of Picasso doing that now, or we had footage of some historic, any artist that we respect and admire, that we would be able to see them doing that? That'd be amazing. Even though you may never become a Picasso or a Warhol, but that capturing that information for the next generation, even if it's just your family, even if it's just that three people that bought your art that one year at that show, they'll always have that to go back to. They always have that piece that expands beyond that canvas that they purchased, you know. So you're giving them stuff, you know. Going back and seeing Warhol's Polaroids is fascinating, you know, and that's just like scrolling through an Instagram account of somebody that you respect. You're getting all this inside information of what they did. And, you know, did he know when he was doing all that that he was going to be as legendary as he was? Nah, that's just what he did, you know, and then it became a thing. So he kept doing it. You know.
Yep. We've got a couple comments here. She said, I agree about excitement, Carrie. Same thing for accepted art pieces for future exhibits that you need to hold off and schedule. I agree. I feel like when I get accepted into a show, I want to post it right away because that you can feel that excitement. I would rather not schedule that. And then she asks, is it a disadvantage of using an AKA name versus your true name? Honestly, I think it's a horse apiece. I think it's what you want. I think it's your brand. I think there's so many artists. So there's a couple in our residency program right now, Liz and Josh Summers. They go by Words in Clay, and I love that for them. It's a name that really fits their business. It fits their brand, and it represents the two of them. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I see a lot in the craft world. A lot of people have kind of cutesy names in the craft world, either alliterations or they rhyme or, and that makes sense in that world. Absolutely. I think, writers have pen names, that kind of thing. I think it's all in who you want to represent to the world.
It gives you, and we talked about this before, when you come up with a name that's not your own, it can often be easier to build a brand around that name, because most names, like mine being Design That Rocks, automatically comes with some inherent icons that go with that. So I can start it off, oh, I'm going to use stars and I'm going to use guitars and I'm going to do whatever. So it gives you things to work on. And like the party one you were just talking about, like their imagery kind of goes with that name. So I think sometimes it can give you an advantage, or maybe not an advantage, but give you some confidence in, I've created this thing, and it's easier for a lot of people to talk about this thing than to talk about themselves. So that's my 2 cents on it. I agree. You can make either one work as long as you have a plan and you know what your goals are and you start setting after those goals. But sometimes having a different name, and that's when I started mine. That's what I did. Like I wasn't as confident in Craig Bauer 20 years ago or 18 years ago when I started. I was more confident in, okay, and at that time I was trying to go after a specific market of musicians in music industry. So it kind of fit. And then I was like, well, is it too cocky? Is it kind of like, oh, well, my designs rock, whatever. So I had all these internal struggles with that name and what I was going to do with it. But as you start and as you start to grow and then you start to realize you do know what you're doing, you are able to help your clients. They do say that you rock on occasion because they love what you did or whatever it is. So it just kind of evolved into being what I wanted it to be. But having a name, having something to work on can often help people who are a little bit introverted, a little bit shy. They're not as, they don't want to toot their own horn a lot. So I've seen that too.
Yeah, I think about obviously myself, right? I'm like, oh, how do I as you know, I've decided on KerryDorsky.com as my plan.
Yeah.
But for me, that's really important because, as I said earlier, this is my career, right? This is what I'm doing on a daily basis and what my name badge says, what my business cards say, right? Like I'm Kerry Dorsky to everybody, and art is just part of what I do.
Right. You will be Kerry Dorsky no matter what you're doing. If you jump out of the art world tomorrow and you become an astrophysicist, you're still going to be that person.
Yep.
So building your brand for yourself makes a lot of sense. It's I think it takes people, you have to reach a certain level of confidence to do that. But I agree. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it's really how you want to position it, what you want to do. If you're more comfortable doing it under a different name, come up with a cool name and start that way and see where it goes.
Or Christine is a great example. So Christine Van Sickle did our residency program last year, and so she went by a business name for a long time, and it's East Twin Arts, and that's kind of what she's known as. Her brand, it's beautiful. She's got this beautiful stamp she puts on things. It's great. It's good imagery. But it says on her website and her social media, East Twin Arts by Christine Van Sickle.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that a lot. To me, it's like she's got this brand and this identity, this kind of fantastical painting world that she lives in, but then ties it to her kind of human part too. So,
yeah. And that resonates with other humans, right? Yeah. We see that's that authenticity part that's coming through. You know who she is and what she's doing.
Yep. I also often joke that I'm the only Kerry Dorsky in the world. Just great Polish.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned that. Yeah, that's great.
If you Google me, you see my entire past career, which is really funny. There's interviews from the Maritime Museum. There's TV interviews I've done here. There's work I did with the Packers at the ad agency. And so it's interesting to me how I think about that of like, okay, if somebody's going to search for me on the internet, they're going to see all the stuff that I did in my past, but it's still part of who I am today and how I got to where I am today.
Yeah,
And that's something to think about too, is like what is your visibility online?
absolutely. I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? Google yourself
Yeah,
frequently. Set up Google alerts for your name, for your business name. See what people are saying,
I
if they're
love
saying
Google.
anything. Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. And you can work to take stuff down if there's stuff out there you don't like. There's paths to go. It may not always be possible, but you can try. But it's that history that shows your experience. So people can search and find something on me from 15 years ago I did, and maybe I look at it now and go, ugh, that wasn't the greatest, but it was a step in the process that got me where I'm at now, and now maybe I know better how to do that thing than I did then. Um,
Next question says input about timing in changing name. Like after 3 years, suddenly one decided to change name. Any pros or cons?
um, it's challenging to change once you have something. I've started to do that myself with Design That Rocks in certain scenarios where I'm just transitioning to Craig Bauer. It is challenging to kind of undo some things that you've done, but if you position it in the right way, where they know that that business name or whatever you had isn't going away, you're now part of it, or it's just you're going to carry people along with you. You know, just be communicative with them, let them know that it's happening, share it on your social, share it on your website. Keep those, look for opportunities to kind of cross brand yourself to let people know that you're doing it. And yeah, it's not easy to do, but people do it.
Yep. And I think you said it after 3 years, I think that's easier too. Rather than 15 to 20, 3 years is probably easier.
3 years is probably easier. Yes.
And I think you make it a big splash, right? Maybe the next exhibit you're in or the next show you do, or if you're doing a pop-up or whatever, you've got signs or banners that say like, look at my new website. Come see my new marketing and branding. Like, this is my refresh and the reason I'm doing it. I love to know that. Of like, hey, maybe
Yes.
you discovered something about yourself that you're like, this is me now. I need to feature this. Or I went through a big life change and I'm really inspired right now. I think the more we share with people and the more, I don't want to say vulnerable, but I think so. I think vulnerability helps connect people. And so oftentimes I'm like, oh yeah, I was going to start a business with a cutesy craft name about 12 years ago. Never did.
Right.
It didn't fit. I was going to just put up like a template website because I was in the middle of making these things that I thought I was going to do. And I let it sit. I'm glad I did. But it's okay to be like, hey, I made to change my mind.
Yeah.
This is more authentic now.
It is, and it's when I look at art as a artist or as a consumer, if I'm looking to purchase art, or I'm researching artists, or I'm looking at it, it's something even at a show or wherever I'm at, any information that I get from them that's personal draws me further and deeper into their work. Whether it's, hey, I'm from Ohio, or I live here, or I do this, or whatever it is, any little piece pulls you deeper. So imagine having a social media account where I've got 50 little pieces of stuff posted about me, whatever, and someone views that, they look at a piece, you're pulling them in further and further into what that is. Hopefully that audience is the audience you want, that are going to respond positively and, oh, I would love to have that piece, versus that's not for them, but then that that's not your audience.
And I think sharing is the best way to make more connections with people and make yourself more memorable. Kind of what you're saying, right? It's like if I go to an art opening and I just do the little like, hey, how are you? Kind of small talk, bebop around. I'm like, oh, that wasn't very memorable. But if somebody's like,
uh,
I painted this because I saw aliens in the woods one night, I'll be like, that guy?
no.
Remember that guy.
Yeah. And it's hard. Like, I get it. Going to an art show, you got your 10 by 10 set up somewhere, and you got people going in and out all day. But if you're in the back of your booth sitting on your stool and you are not talking to me when I come in and you're not engaging people at all, unless you're eating lunch, but if you're sitting there on your phone or you're there with your significant other and you're talking and all I get is a hi, and if I don't get anything else, there's no connection there. I mean, I'm not going to validate your work by giving you any more of my attention. I'm going to look around and go, okay, I'm going to go on to the next thing.
And don't worry about being too weird, because
No,
people will walk by if they think you're too weird.
right.
But your authentic self will attract more people.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Rachel has a comment in here, and she said, I have heard that Instagram Lives seems to have a better reach after the live is over. Haven't tried this yet. Any thoughts?
I haven't tried either. I would guess that it probably does have better reach after, because again, trying to get everybody to go to someplace at a certain time these days is challenging. Whereas it lives on, being recorded, you post it as a reel or something, is probably going to have a bigger reach. But again, depending on what your goals are, if your goal is to demo something and you have a targeted list of 30 people, I'm going to do this live at 5 o'clock, and you get 10 of those people to show up at 5 o'clock to watch your demo. I'd rather have that targeted 10 than 500 seeing it later who don't care. Right.
Also, I think maybe again, this is my own personal opinion, but don't do it if you're not comfortable.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like maybe try it a few times. That's
Mhm.
absolutely, like, the first few times you might be a little awkward. But sometimes I come across lives and I'm like, why is this person just sitting there?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, if a lot of people, like, I don't do lives. I don't go on my social and do lives ever. It's not my thing. I could do it. Like, I'm comfortable enough to do it, but I just don't feel my audience wants to see me
Yeah.
in my face. So I don't do it. But if you ever think you're not good enough to do it, spend an hour, go on TikTok live some Wednesday, Thursday night at 10 o'clock. You get a range of people where you swear that this person could work at QVC. They're so smooth and they're so slick. And you get people who you can barely understand their accent down south. Like, it's such a range of people, and they're all doing it, and they all have 1,000+ people watching.
It's
You know,
amazing.
it's the craziest. So there's no, you can't be bad enough to turn people away. People watch. You'll find your audience out there.
For sure. And to Rachel specifically, people love ASMR videos. And I know that, like, rolling ink makes that really great.
Yeah.
And like peeling prints off, like, Rachel's a printmaker for those of you watching. And I think about videos like that. I get sucked into watercolor making videos all the time. I could watch them, like, do that watercolor mixing thing on that slab for hours. I don't know why, but there's
Yeah.
things like that I'm like, oh yeah, they could be an amazing painter, but I keep getting pulled into them because of these other things they're showing me. But then when I'm like, oh yeah, who's that watercolor artist that I really like online? That's who I'm gonna think of. So
Oh yeah.
it contributes, absolutely. It pulls
Yeah.
people in
It
a way that
does.
maybe just like still photos don't.
And we used to have such a, even in the early days of the internet and stuff, like, there was such a stigma about, well, your video's got to be a certain quality. You have to have a good presence to speak, and you need all these things. And now everybody from grandma to a 3-year-old, they're making videos and people are watching them. Like, the quality expectation has gone down so much. So even a bad video explaining what you're doing in your process is still a good video. It's supporting what you're doing.
And don't be afraid to laugh at yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, again, you got to have thick skin. You got to, don't be afraid to, you know, um, just be who you are. It's no different than talking in person. It's the same kind of thing.
And it doesn't define your worth as a person or as an artist. That thick skin, you got to remind yourself of that.
Right. You do. And you have to do it for the right reasons. You again, before you jump in and you're going to make all these social accounts, you're going to do all this stuff, I go back to what's your goal for 2024, for example? Like what are you trying to do next year that you're not doing this year? And if your goal is, well, I want to exhibit at 2 more events, or I want to make my first sale next year, or my fifth sale. Okay, well, how are you going to make that fifth sale? What are you going to do different this year than you did last year? And the same is for social media. If you did the same things next year that you're doing this year, you're going to get the same results, right? So what could I do differently that I'm not doing this year I could do next year?
And look at what you've done. You know, you can go back in all of your Instagram posts and look at, especially if you have a professional account, which I highly recommend swapping your Instagram into the professional account. You can see all those insights. And it's
Yes,
really quite eye-opening. I find it really fascinating of like what of mine gets more reach or brings in new people, and
right.
you've
That is
got
the
data.
that's the one big advantage of social media and websites too. Like everything digitally is tracked.
Yep.
You can get data on every single page, every single click, every single thing that you do. You can get that information. You can't get that at a show.
Oh,
People walking around, you don't get that information. But if you are at the show and you make note and you handed out 150 business cards and you check over the next 4 days how many people went to my website, if you see a spike in those website hits, that confirms that what you did at that show worked. People were driven to your site, and ultimately trickles down to purchases, things like that if you have an e-commerce site.
the other thing, we got to wrap up because I know it's 5:01. But the other thing the college has started doing for us is trackable QR codes. So not
Oh yeah.
only put QR codes in some of our brochures and on flyers on things, then I can go in and see how many times those QR codes were scanned. So I can see, are people finding my website from this exhibit? Are they finding it from this rack card or this poster or this brochure?
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me too, because you can make decisions based on that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that with, going to trade shows, when you go to different events, tracking which events are getting more reach than other events.
Okay, any last questions? Because I always say I like to be super punctual. I don't usually let these things go late. So, okay, then I'm going to wrap it up. Craig, thank you very much. I know we could talk all night about these topics because
Yeah.
are
Yeah, you're
very
very welcome. Thanks for having me.
absolutely. And everybody else, thank you very much. Have a great holiday break. We are closed until the 2nd, but we will get this posted online very soon. So, thank you guys. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.